I want people with an ownership mindset. And that's hard to pin down, right? Everybody says, oh, like you ask 10 agents, are you full-time in this business? And 9 will tell you, 100% I'm full-time in this business.
Yeah.
Even if they have another full-time job, I'm full-time because this business obsesses me, right?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily full-time, right? What I wanted to know was that on my team, frankly, if you don't need it as badly as I do, it's probably not going to work. This is the
Yeah.
only way I provide for my family. So you come onto this team, and if this is the only way you provide for your family, then there's some serious there's some serious motivation.
How do you recruit and retain happy agents? I'm on a mission to answer that question by talking with the unsung heroes that empower real estate agents. I'm Seth Price. Tune in each week as I sit down with back office heroes to learn what's working and what's not.
Patrick, welcome. I'm super psyched to chat with you. Thanks so much for taking time out today.
My pleasure, Seth. It's a blast to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we got introduced through Blake Showalter at Atoka Properties. And, I was having a lot of conversations with her about, she's built an amazing team to support all the agents at Atoka. I think they're at 150 now. And I was talking to her about how it's one thing to do all this stuff, but how do they actually help the agents think about generating leads and production? It's like you're in the back office. There's a whole bunch of people there doing stuff and sort of reacting just nonstop to task or request or problems. How do you actually help someone do better? And then you and I had a conversation where you were talking about the way that you think about training folks to think about, managing your pipeline. And I wanted to have more of that conversation, which is you've managed a lot of folks, you are still producing, you interact and train a lot of folks. How do you think about lead gen in the world of empowering agents?
Yeah, so I've very much moved away from this idea of even calling lead gen anymore. Lead gen, I think, is I got curious about this a few years ago, and as you know, started writing a lot about this, and actually tried to go figure out how should agents think about lead gen? Where do we start talking about this at first? And I actually went back to when we started using these types of terms, and I think you go back to you really don't start using the word lead gen until the late 1970s. Yeah. When it comes to sales, which is a fascinating thing. We think it's just ubiquitous. It's just part of our lexicon when it comes to how we make business come the door. We're rainmakers. Synonymous with that as being a lead generator. And I think language matters a lot. When we change the language around how we think about the families and the individuals who we have the opportunity in this business, in real estate, to work with, we actually begin to change our relationship with them. And so what I'm sort of obsessed, as you know, with this whole idea of business development in a very different light from a lot of the tactics that came out in 1970s, 1980s, and still persist in almost every area of business development nowadays. And which I think are ultimately making, and you can see sort of the effect. Real estate's one of these interesting industries where we have only felt the effect of disruptive forces in very recent years, whereas travel agents felt it a whole lot earlier, and there's not a whole lot of them left, right?
Yeah.
My friend who was a financial planner, I had lunch with him today. They started feeling it way before us. My friends who are attorneys, my friends who are doctors, even have felt the impact of disruption before us, and all of them, the ones who are surviving in those fields, are the ones who are providing indispensably good service and who almost to a person are no longer able to look at their clients from a lead standpoint, and they have to go deeply relational, because the only thing that can't be disrupted is our relationships.
And I think it's so in many ways challenging for me to sort of, I'm definitely a people and brand person.
Right.
but I also have run sales teams, and I run a product marketing team today, and product and all that stuff. And we think in leads. I mean, like the
Top of the funnel.
quantifiable.
Yeah.
Well, we think in there are numbers, right? We have a P&L, and we sort of understand how many customers that we're bringing on. And that is like, I get the brand piece. I do see a lot of folks spending a lot of money on, quote unquote, lead gen, where they're spending dollars either on Zillow or on Google or on Facebook, and they're getting people to fill out a form, home valuation form, most popular form in real estate. The thing that I wrestle with is I do see people doing lead gen. They're spending dollars, and a lot of times those are teams or brokers because they can sort of tell people to do stuff. On the agent side, I haven't seen it work so well within a brokerage unless you have the infrastructure to follow up. And so I totally understand how it's not necessarily effective. The thing that I have not been able to see is, how do you get someone to go, yes, I understand that relationships matter. I understand that nurturing matters, and get them to do the work required.
Right. When I think it's not, so I think when we think about lead gen, we think about certain activities. Mm-hmm. And I think lead gen is first the mentality, and the activities then come of that mentality. So you can go and do networking in a lead gen fashion, where it's like speed dating. I'm going out, I'm handing out as many cards as possible. I'm knocking on as many doors of business owners as possible. And you can actually turn that into a lead gen activity, or you can figure out how to go and build trust with the right people in your community so that they can go and make introductions to you to other influential people in your community. You're doing almost the same activity, but it's a different spin. And so what I don't want people to hear is like, oh, it's Pat's criticizing the activities. What I'm critical of is the mindset behind it. Because what I'm finding, I've been in this business for about 17 years now. What I'm finding is a ton of burnout in agents who I train, agents on my team, people who are going, gosh, Pat, I used to get my ROI when I'd show up to an open house and would do these things was so much higher. It's not anymore. When I used to spend on this site, whatever it is, now I have to spend exponentially more in order to get the same number of leads coming in the door. Gosh, Pat, I used to smile and dial. I was, older agents. I was a sweat hog guy, and I used to smile and dial, just pound the phones. And I've done all of that training. I'm a master on the phone, and I have to spend more hours doing that than I ever did in order to get the same number of deals. And so what's interesting about lead gen is it actually makes us more disruptible, because the more that you identify people as leads, the more easily those leads can be generated by somebody else.
Commodification.
Total commoditization of these really amazing relationships that we have the honor of being able to sit in front of and coach through the most important, perhaps the most important purchase of their lives or sale of their lives. Yeah. And so what I'm trying to do is reframe the conversation around business development in what I believe is a much more fulfilling way for agents. And for the client as well.
So I totally buy that. Like, I see that in my interactions in the world. We recently bought a new house, which I'm sitting in, and I could have done everything myself, I think, with a lot of, hair pulling if I had hair. But I really wanted a person. I wanted a confidant and someone to be my, consigliere, fiduciary guide, all of those things. And for me, it was fantastic. And I've done that repeatedly. Like, I don't think I would do it any other way. I like choosing someone that I know, even if I don't mean this the wrong way, even if it costs me more. Like, if I think of contractors, because of course you buy a new house, you got to spend a lot of money doing stuff on it, is every time that I've chosen the cheapest price, I've had to redo the work. And so, sort of my motto at this point is I try and find folks that I'm going to work with over the long term, pay them market rate or whatever is a little bit more, and know that they're going to show up, they're going to do a great job. If they break something, they're going to fix it, all of those things. How do you, so what's the, I get the word change, what's the mindset shift, and how do you help people think about that? Like, I know Atoka Blake sings your praises. She's like, hey, you've done trainings for her agents and they were game changing. What is that? Like, what did you do and how does that work?
Right. So, well, I want to go back to something you said about, because what you're describing is somebody who you trust, but you trust them. And actually, here's the big thing for us. We get into this business, and one of the first things my first broker told me is like, go write down all the people that came to your wedding and all the people you went to college with and all this, right? And they, by the way, they know that you're brand new in this business, right?
Yeah.
So like they're using you only because they know you, right? And that's problematic. And I remember being a new agent going, gosh, I'm tired of people using me out of pity. I want people to use me because, I'm an econ major. So the opportunity cost in economic terms is so great of not to not use me that they can't imagine not using me and referring me to their friends. So as an industry, we have a lot of work to do, right? What does it look like as a new agent? But brokers who are listening, what would it look like for you to be able to honestly look at your agent body and say, gosh, there's the consumers, for consumers, is a massive opportunity cost for them to use anybody but my agents, or to go it alone, or to use the discount broker, whatever, right? The opportunity cost of not using us, and that's what I want when I hire a good attorney, a good doctor, whoever, somebody I think in particular in service industries. So I think we got to nail that, and then we don't become commodities ourselves. But that's just part of the problem. The next part of the problem is how we bring our wares, our abilities to the marketplace and show the marketplace, hey, by the way, I'm not somebody that's just easily dispensable.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where I think there's, and maybe to your point, to your question about Blake, what I realized a few years back is that almost all of my business, as much of the lead gen stuff that I was doing, I was pounding the phones, I was knocking doors, and I was pretty good at it. I was winning awards in my brokerage for, best that month, best that year, number of transactions. So don't get me wrong, all of this produced a trickle of business, and a lot of trickles can fill up a bucket, but I was really unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And so the shift for me happened. Actually, I went and I went to the best fiduciaries I could find outside of our industry, because I just couldn't find the answers in our industry. And I went and talked to a friend who is one of the best attorneys in the area where I live here in DC. And I sat down and I said, listen, I just want to understand how you've done it, how you've built an amazing business, how you've brought people into your organization. Why do people just constantly, for years now, rely on you? And I just took copious notes for about 45 minutes, and I just asked him questions. And at the end of that meeting, was amazing. He turned to me, and by the way, I was asking only about him the whole time. Yeah. And he turned to me and said, hey, Pat. And I'm like, I'm a little bit older than I was then. And so I'm maybe 2-3 years in the business at this point, and having some success, but not really satisfied with it. And he said to me, Pat, you're going to do really good at this business. Now, we hadn't talked about my business at all.
Yeah.
He said, here's what I want to do. I've got to run off to my next appointment, but I'm going to put you in touch with 2 people who I really respect a lot. I think you're going to have a lot in common with them. So let me connect you to those people. I thought, this is amazing, right? This guy, I would love anybody that this guy would put me in touch with. That's fantastic. So boom, he puts me in touch with those 2 people. And then he says, also, if you run across any potential investment properties, I don't know your world, but I'm sure you could find some stuff for me to invest into. And I've just been looking and nobody's been able to give me anything. if you run across something, would you send it my way? Thought, my gosh. So this guy's asking me to be in business with him, and he's connecting me to his people. And he goes off, and sure enough, those people were amazing contacts. And I thought to myself, now, if I could have that type of conversation on a daily basis, what would my business look like?
Yeah.
And that was a big shift for me. And that friend of mine became sort of the paradigm that I wanted to invest myself into. By the way, I had a blast. I had an amazing conversation. He taught me much more than just, some of the things that I was asking about. How do you keep it all together? We got into family life. We got into how he works out, his spiritual life. We got into all sorts of great stuff. I learned so much. I was done by about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was off to the races, and I had 2 more appointments from it. And he put his name to me, and that shifted everything for me. And what I did is I started analyzing the rest of my relationships to, sort of measuring them against him. And I thought, gosh, there are very few other people who I can actually have that type of conversation with in my world. And by the way, I grew up in this town. Yeah. I know a lot of people. My wife's from this town. So I began to figure out how to go have that conversation as often as humanly possible on a weekly basis. And that's what led me to the manuscript that I sent you that spurned this whole conversation. And here, that's where we are today. And that's a lot of the stuff that I teach Blake and her agents.
Do you find that they're, like, I always think about training, professional development. Do you find that the folks that go through the training are on their way? Like, you know what I mean? Like, lots of people sign up to conferences and to courses. Many people don't finish any of those things. Like, if you look at the stats, I mean, Blake is certainly speaking highly of you, and I didn't get to speak to some of the agents, but she's like, your training is great. How do you impact those individuals?
Yeah. So Blake has a great, Blake has actually a great agent there who, I've trained him. He's been to my trainings, and he likes what I talk about enough that I actually sent him a copy of my upcoming book. It's not out yet, but, this is a few months ago. I said, hey, I'd love to get your sense of it, because you're applying this and you're probably applying it better than anybody in the brokerage. And he went from a part-time agent doing 5-6 deals a year.
Yeah.
His first quarter this year, it's been about a year since he started applying this. His first quarter this year, he closed 15 deals. So this is not a wait and see, maybe it'll happen magically because I have relationships. If you do this system, we call it a 1-a-day system. If you're having one of these conversations a day, your business explodes. By the way, you're not spending anything on lead gen. 0.
Yeah.
And so what you're finding is tremendous referral sources. But we typically do that in a lead gen mindset.
Yeah.
And the reason people go, I don't know if I want to send you business, is because we go looking for handouts as agents.
Yeah. Oh, you've raised a really good point. I think about all the taglines. So I've spoken at a lot of conferences, and it's been a little bit since I've been speaking at them, but everyone sort of puts me on their mailing list. Like, they just add my name because they've got it somehow. And I get thousands of, emails that are like a listing. I don't even live in Des Moines. You know what I mean? And
you're on a drip campaign. Yeah.
I'm on a drip campaign. And at the bottom, it says, if you know anyone buying a house, I'd love a referral. And then I'm in my mind, I'm going, I don't even know who this person is and how I got on their mailing list. Right. And so that's the handout part that you're talking about, I assume.
Yeah. And, the other thing that we've done that's really been pretty impactful is when you're doing lead generation in real estate, you're almost always doing B2C. You're going business consumer, right? What I teach is B2B, very, very sort of unabashedly. Now, that feels like there's an extra step in there. Right? And it takes us a little bit of time to go, okay, well, I don't So I'm not calling FSBOs, expireds, withdrawals. Those are the people who I want to talk to.
Yeah.
Are they? Or do you want to go talk to somebody who your friend just put you in touch with and put their name to you, and you walk in and there's no discussion about commission? And if you could systematically make sure that that happens, what would that look like?
Yeah.
And so I think we like to think about that as an option, right? Or we talk, I work by referral. Okay. That's not exactly what we're talking about here, right? So we say, I work by referral. I get lots of past clients and I get a huge sphere of influence. Okay. What I'm saying is, if you had 6 players of the type I'm talking about, what I call influencers, your business just gets totally blown up. And I've seen it. The year that I decided to go find influencers in my business, I went from 12 deals a year to 36 deals that next year over a 12 month period.
So explain the difference, because that term is a little corrupted. Influence, the Kardashians have taken that to the bank. Explain what you mean by an influencer.
Yeah. So, and this is something I really get into big in the book, but I want to, influence, I want you to think about this as a pyramid. In fact, I don't know if anybody can see this, but I'm going to throw this. Is this all right? Can I try this?
Yeah, do it. Do it up.
We're going to act like we're all in person here.
Okay, great.
Here we go. So you've got a pyramid.
Yep.
Okay. And this is what I call the influencer pyramid. And the great majority of people that what I found is that they're relatively low influence.
Yeah.
They're most of the people down here at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, when we get into real estate, we're told to make lists that largely consist of these people. And so we pull our hair out. It's what happened here, right? We pull our hair out over years trying to get our friends and our family and people who we went to college with and everybody else who we run into and whose kids we coach to get them to use us. And so, and it's super frustrating. And then we find out that they use somebody else. And so emotionally we're like destroyed, right? Yeah. How is it that these people couldn't use him? Why? There's 1.5 million real estate agents, realtors, right? It's 2 million people with their real estate license. That's why. So you're fishing where everybody else is fishing with people who don't typically think of you in a professional light.
Yeah.
It's nothing against you. It's just what we all do. Okay. Here is the middle of the pyramid. Now, I'll get to some of the qualifications here. These are really the only people that matter if you really want to blow up your business. Right? If I told you, hey, Seth, we're going to go build an amazing team of salespeople for Placester, and we're going to go out and find great people. There's a few ways to do that. There's the churn and burn. We're going to bring in tons of people. We're going to bring them in. We're give them scripts and dialogues, have them pound the phones and see who wins. Yeah. We'll get to some talent, maybe. Or we can bring in a few absolutely already successful, super talented people. What I want to propose to you is that we're in the talent game. Yeah. We're going to spend a lot more time, effort, money trying to convince these people to work with us than we ever will up here. But you actually have to speak a totally different language to go and find influence. And when you find influence, and I've seen it in my own team, when I found my 6 agents, my business blew up on my team. And so we can see this paradigm from influence all over the place, not just in real estate. But that's the first thing is I want to propose to you that you're in the talent game, regardless of the industry that you're in. Now, to answer sort of on a deeper level, what are you looking for in terms of folks? I'll just shorthand this for you really quick. The first thing that I want you to look for is who is spending the most time with their clients, right? Longevity matters. Yeah. Clients trust people like financial planners who have been working with their family maybe for generations. Implicitly, at least you hope that they do. They trust their attorneys. They trust doctors. They trust contractors who are in their house for many, many months. So what I found is that when I could find people who spent 1 month or more with their clients, they oftentimes could exert a very high level of influence on those relationships. When I found, here's my frustration. I was networking typically who with people who spent 1 week or less with their clients. Nothing wrong with them. Those are my home inspectors. Those are my title guys. Those are my those are all the people I gave tons of business. Every time I did a deal, I was giving business to those folks. But you know what? They couldn't exert the same level of influence that these folks could. Right?
Interesting.
However, if they owned their own company, they could shift up here. And I talk a lot about that in the book. These folks spend less than an hour typically with their clients, right? So most of the people that you know, and I won't belabor it, but most of the people you know spend less than an hour typically with their average client. Certainly less than a day. So we'll call it less than 1 day here. And so it's a very transactional relationship with the great majority of folks in that world.
And does that pyramid apply to the same way you were talking about before, which is the bottom of the pyramid, or all of the folks that, you know, you're related to, or you just casually know over time?
Yeah. Like my mom is in the bottom of the pyramid. I love her. She's amazing. But she's not influential for my business.
Does she know this?
She does. She does. And she's heard me say this. And I love you, Mom. But like my kids are in the bottom of the pyramid. They don't have a huge, I mean, obviously they're huge motivators, but they don't have a huge influence on me driving revenue into my business.
Okay.
So I started thinking to myself, well, gosh, I have an obligation as a dad to spend time with my kids. So when I leave the house, I'm going to go spend time with the most influential people for my business. So that I can decide to spend time with the least influential people for my business, perhaps, but where I want to spend my time, right? I get to decide who I spend time with down here. This is not a non-negotiable when it comes to the people I want to go hang out with. So longevity was the first piece. The second piece for me when it came to the pyramid was trust. I wanted to find people who, because of the trust that they exert on relationships, actually get paid exponentially more.
Okay.
Right? It's not just like, oh, I really, really trust my barber. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And he may, like, clearly that's a bad example for me, but I really trust whoever, the baker, whoever, but they don't spend enough time with clients typically. So longevity plus trust really adds up to something. So what I found is that this is highest trust up here, and this is lowest. Again, nothing wrong here, but people who exert high levels of trust are people who are routinely, for them to have to typically make money, right? But you can find this in a pastor, you can find this in a rabbi, right? If that place is growing, it's growing because people trust them. Right? If it's not growing, right, they may not be exerting their influence as well as they could. They may not be in a trusting relationship enough. So that was the second thing, is I wanted to find people who put their clients first so routinely that they actually got paid a lot more as a result of that, in whatever form of payment that had to be, right? Because we all have clients, whether we're in for-profit or nonprofit. And again, I'm shorthanding a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. When you shifted from large brokerage to team, and if I can ask, why did you do that? Like, what was the reasoning behind? Because you had the brokerage was pretty significant from what I understand. Yeah,
it was significant for me. It really was about going and hanging out with these people in my team. Right? So when I brought people into my team, what I realized is I have a really, really big obligation to these people and their families.
Yeah.
Brokerages are great. And I deeply admire people who run brokerages, especially good ones. And we're at one where, they do brokerage exceptionally well, and they bend over backwards for their agents. What I found is that I made a determination that of two things. First, I wanted to invest myself. Life is short. I want to invest myself into a few very key relationships deeply. And when I do that, by the way, the money follows much more than when I try to spread myself out over, 50, 100 plus people. Right. Okay. So that was a strategic decision on my part to do that. It's not necessarily the case for everybody. when it comes to a team. But what I also found is that that was the talent. And here's the big thing for me. The talent that I was going to have my kids do internships with was on my team right in front of me.
Got it.
So for me, it's a deeply personal thing. Like, hey, how well do I trust you? Do I trust you at the highest level? Right.
Yeah.
Then you get into the inner circle. And so, yeah, you can see sort of that paradigm playing out in that way as well.
When you are, I mean, I think this is a challenge that all brokerages have, which is, hey, part of how you grow is recruiting and retaining folks.
Right.
How do you, I think you walked me through a little bit of how you determine who's going to be good or not. What's your, rubric for figuring out who gets to be on the team?
Yeah. So I want people with an ownership mindset, and that's hard to pin down, right? Everybody says, oh, like you ask 10 agents, are you full-time in this business? And 9 will tell you 100% I'm full-time in this business.
Yeah.
Even if they have another full-time job, I'm full-time because this business obsesses me, right?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily full-time, right? What I wanted to know was that on my team, frankly, if you don't need it as badly as I do, it's probably not going to work. This is the only way I provide for my family. So you come onto this team, and if this is the only way you provide for your family, then there's some serious there's some serious motivation. So that was a big one for me.
Yeah.
And that forces you into an ownership mindset. And it also puts you into a place where you're humble enough to listen because you're hungry.
Okay. Is this, I've heard a lot of my friends from this industry happen to work in back office and like supporting, doing
amazing
all the amazing work that happens there. There's this sort of underlying frustration at times that sometimes they do a lot of work and it is not, I don't want to say not embraced, just the ball or the baton gets passed, but the person who received the baton doesn't keep running with it. And how do you avoid that? Like, how do you make sure that you're building and recruiting an organization where you're setting people up for success, you're supporting them as best as humanly possible, and you're weeding out the ones that just aren't going to be a good fit? Like, how do you?
Yeah, I think you have to understand that your brokerage is also going to look like this. You're going to have people who, when you give them something, they're going to absolutely crush it. They're going to do amazing work. And you're going to have people who, no matter, you can stand on your head, you can do beautiful work, put it in front of them, tee it up, and it still won't be as effective, no matter what that is, right?
Yeah.
And that's the reality of sort of the human condition, right? Doesn't mean they're bad. Just like I was saying, you got most of the people I love are at the bottom of my pyramid when it comes to influencing revenue that comes in the door.
And you love some of them. I
love all of them. I mean, they're awesome. But I'm not losing sleep anymore over the fact that they're not moving the needle for me in my business. Understand that talent is really, it's everywhere. And you're in the talent game and you're always looking for those folks. So if you're in the back office, you're going to have a brokerage and you need to find your 6 there as well. Look for them. Mm-hmm. Look for the people who are going to move the needle for you and your brokerage, right? And by the way, when I talk about an ownership mindset, I'm not talking about somebody who has their name on the sign, right? I'm great people in the back office. I only want people in my organization who are behind the scenes to own their role entirely.
Yeah.
Right? And because they enjoy their role more that way, they get much more out of it. And they don't, by the way, they don't want me messing with their role. They go, get out of my office, leave me alone. I'm going to take this, I'm going to take the bull by the horns and run with it. Those are amazing people. And I think when you understand that your whole job is to own your role entirely and to go find people with whom you can collaborate to grow the organization, that frankly makes you totally indispensable to the
Yeah.
organization.
When you are thinking about the folks that are in the, because there's lots of new agents in the industry. The industry is built on that. Like people were doing other jobs and start. How do you help someone transition up that pyramid?
Right. So when they get in and actually becoming an influencer themselves.
Yeah. Like not everyone can start from being at the top of the pyramid.
No,
And
none of
so,
us do. Right.
yeah. So how do you, from your role, you're clearly, you have the indispensable agent training, you're writing a book, which I want to talk about in a little bit. How do you help folks, go up the ladder?
Yeah. So for me, this is twofold, right?
Yeah.
And the two have to work really, really well together. Actually, I was talking to my business partner, John Kirk. We've actually changed the name of Kilner Group to now Kilner Kirk. And we were talking about, he's been with me for 8 years now, tremendous agent. He's one of the top listing agents in the DC metro area. And when he first got in, we knew two things. By the way, he had 6 kids when he got into the business. Yeah. So we had to make sure he like got up and running as quickly as possible. And he needed as bad as I did, perhaps even more. Now, John came in and I knew I had to knock down 2 dominoes. One was getting him superb at the craft of the business, making the deal happen.
Okay.
And so in Indispensable Agent, the whole training program is about the craft of the business.
Okay.
And that focuses on how are you analyzing the market? I mean, you have to be surgical, exponentially better than Zillow, right? And you have to be able to break that open for clients and have them go, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I'm hearing here. Pat, Seth, Greg, is indispensable to me owning a home and doing it right. So you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to understand how to write contracts that win, especially now. I mean, you're competing against 20 other offers, against cash offers 15, 20, 25% of the time. So we have to understand how to write and influence the other side of the deal and everything in between, everything from how to list homes, how to buy homes, how to negotiate. So I've got a whole 8-week program that walks agents through that. It's very intensive. And we chart how they're doing and we actually give them feedback through that. So that's Indispensable Agent Bootcamp. The other side of it for John, and actually training John helped me codify a lot of those things in bootcamp because we had to ramp it up as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Every month mattered. The other side of it was you can have the best darn abilities in the world and still not actually effectively bring that to the marketplace, and then you don't make any money.
Yeah.
So we had to come up with a business development arm and paradigm that would work not just this year, but all the way into the future. And so I taught him the principles of the influencer pyramid, and then we went out and did it together as well.
Oh, interesting.
And so he was my first guinea pig. It was kind of like one of these burn the ships moments where it's like, all right, like you want to be in business here, let's make this happen. And we both jumped in, and I'm really grateful that we did. He is definitely one of my 6, right?
Yeah.
He's got a massive impact on my business and I think me on his as well. So that's where it started. And and those 2 rocks, right? Like craft mastery and then business development in a way that's not disruptable, right? So how do you business develop such that Zillow can't imitate it, such that it can't be shipped offshore, such that some rookie can't learn a script and beat me at it? That's really important, right? So I can jump up and down and say, I'm really good at this. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been doing this for 30 years and still lose the game because I'm not actually a business developer.
Interesting. I like that. When you, I read the book and I love that it told me the stories of the process of focusing on craft and focusing on what you call your 6. Tell me about, a little bit about the book, why you wrote it and who it's for.
Well, first of all, thanks for reading it. Not everybody who you send a manuscript actually reads it. So,
Well, I couldn't, very well, have this conversation without taking the time to read it.
well,
So,
I really appreciate it because you've heard those podcasts. You're like, this guy
yeah,
hasn't read this book. So,
yeah,
but, and so thank you. So I wrote it initially for my team because
okay,
as we grow, so it really started as training for my team.
yeah,
And as I wrote it, I realized about myself, and I think this is important, frankly, for anybody in any business. It's, who do you want to become as a result of the work that you're doing?
yeah,
And one of the things I realized about myself is that I wanted to become a really excellent writer because I believe that the people who are most convincing when it comes to ideas, and I'm going to be in this industry for a long time, are the people who have thought about them most deeply. And the people who've thought about them most deeply typically have written extensively on them. So I started writing with that in mind. And then I get an editor who kicked my butt. And if you've ever written with an editor who's just a stickler, and so I found a great editor and worked with him over the course of a year, and every day for an hour I just sat down and wrote whether I wanted to or not, and and here we are a year plus later with a manuscript, and I can't yet say who picked it up, but we've got a publisher who's picked it up, and it's really exciting. So, but I also, that's kind of the reason behind it. I think if nothing else, it was going to be something great for my team. And
yeah,
the beauty of this journey for me has been that, as I've put it in people's hands, they've really been attracted to it, and it's really started to impact other agents outside of my brokerage, outside of my my DC metro area here, where I do most of my business. And so it's been a really, really cool thing.
We've got a couple of questions. Question number one is, what does your team look like?
So we are, it's a relatively small team. We've got 10 people total on the team, 2 admin. So I've got director of operations who does all our transaction management. She's been with me for almost 15 years now. She's amazing. And we've got a full-time marketing guru who is my right hand on everything. And so she's very much the implementer to all of our crazy vision of all sorts of stuff. So those 2, and then the rest are agents. John and I, so the 2 partners are at this point, I've been out of production, so client-facing production, for the last 9 years now.
Yeah.
John, we took out, all John does is bring in the business, but then he hands it off.
Okay.
And so he's been doing that for the last year. That was a huge shift for us.
Yeah.
And so, that's what our team looks like. And we've got agents, almost all of whom who both do listing and buy side. We had a point where we were just doing listing agents only and buyer agents only. And what we found is that we've got a lot of really, really talented people who can do both sides. So, and that's it. It's a pretty lean operation.
And I'll follow up on that question, which is the admin team. Are they in office? Are they remote?
So they have total freedom to be remote. One just likes to be in the office quite a bit, so she does. And the other one is remote because she does. And our philosophy on it is, I don't care where you're working from as long as you're getting your work done and you're killing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, I've been remote now for 14 months or whenever this thing started. And so I sort of miss the office a bit. I do like the freedom of working when I want to work, but I do find that I'm working all the time because I don't know when to turn it off.
Right.
Which is a little bit of a problem. But I have a therapist for that.
Yeah. I got a 2-year-old for that. So it's great. As soon as I walk out those doors, she's all over it. She's like, listen, you're putting down that phone and you're hugging me. So
how can people find out about the Indispensable Agent training and other stuff that you do?
Absolutely. So indispensableagent.com, theindispensableagent.com is where you can find boot camp, that 8-week program I mentioned. And it's designed I've got 2 tracks now. I designed it initially for new agents. I found that I had some agents who are experienced 5 to 10 years in the business who got a lot out of it. And so I designed a second track that has a little bit less work for the busy agent who already has a big business going, but who wants to sharpen their skills a little bit more. And then when it comes to the book, findyoursix.com is up and running. And you can also, if you just look up patrickkilner.com, you'll find that those are both direct to that site. So you can find out more about the book.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And
absolutely.
Yeah, keep at it. I'm really excited about what you put together.
I appreciate it. And hey, listen, at any time, by the way, and I don't know if this is like total segue. I know that Craig, and maybe been when you jumped off, said that there was a couple questions. Do we want to try to answer any?
I think I got them. He's slacking with me. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate all of you.